This is on isolation and how to deal with it, or how I tried to deal with it in the time after the cartoon controversy. It was indeed a very hard time, um, and I wasn't really ready for it. But somehow I think I got through, or I'm just getting through, or maybe just made the most part of it. But it was looking back at it, it was really hard and a very difficult process to get through. Imagine you are in a country where you feel you are a very hated person. You're very known. Everybody can recognize your face on the street almost, and people just have an idea who you are and have their thoughts about who you are. And Denmark isn't the easiest place to be when you are not a very well liked person, because these people don't just show you that they don't like you mostly. I met some Danes who were very honest, and I could feel their anger and feel how they were moved from the inside to see me or watch me talk, or had a comment that was harsh, and for them that was like a volcano that erupted, because usually the way they show their content, it's by hiding it and talking about it in secret and behind people's back, and they keep that discontent into their own minds. They don't show it or reveal it so easily, but they act on it. They isolate you, don't want to talk to you, they don't want to have any relation with you, because they see you as a criminal or somebody who has been doing wrong to society, and that's holy. Uh, there is no forgiveness in many of these people's minds and hearts, especially when they think you've done something that's very, very crucial and very cruel and evil. So, if I want to relate to how they think, I can understand it. So, when I used to walk on the streets, in the beginning, it was mostly in the area of Gerup, where I was mostly surrounded by Muslim people who mostly cheered or respected my fight and knew that I wasn't that guy. But when I was walking, like in the seminary, or was out in the public, that was a totally different place to be. So it was like walking into two very different communities in the same country. And when I used to meet these people or feel their eyes on me, or how they felt, I appreciated very much those who came and said it or stopped up and wanted to say something. Once I had a guy who said something very nice. I was coming out of the train station in Aarhus, and that was, I guess, back in 2009, 10 or something. And he, 9, I can't remember, but the early years. And he said to me, Akari, I just want to tell you that we are not all being the same, wanting to spit on you Muslims. And I said, I understand and appreciate that. And and I understand even those who felt they hated me, that's because they had a picture of me as that cruel and evil guy who wants to do evil things and destroy society. And imagine how hard that was into my very sensitive heart and mind, that I was myself a victim of incidents that happened around me, and I was also part of something that I didn't know where it was going. And even though I was, as I told in the cartoon stories, part of a movement, but everything got us also out of hand. And many of the things people thought I did, it wasn't my doing. It was like something that happened in the groups or in the dynamics of the case and the situation, and things got stuck. So there is at least more than one responsible part, but people don't see it that way, and some people don't want to see it that way. I'm basically raised in Denmark. I've been here since I was a kid, with a small interruption, but I know how they feel and think mostly, and I know this what they call the hidden swine inside some of these people's minds and hearts, and we've lived out in the rural area, so that was not easy. But also in towns, people are easy going, but they can also ignore you and meet you with the same isolation, like psychological isolation, and that's a killer. That's usually for anybody else a killer, because you will just be branded and you are not welcome anywhere, and people wouldn't even invite you to coffee. And if they do or meet you there, they will be very contempt, and they wouldn't like having you there. So it wasn't at least it wasn't easy having this psychological situation in your life, but I had it also not only psychologically but also socially. I couldn't get any job, and people kept rejecting me, and I knew why. It was my name. They could see, oh, that's that guy. How can we have him here? It's impossible. He must be mad or a tyrant or a dictator or very hard to talk to, and he must be impossible. Or at least, if they thought I wasn't all that, they think he doesn't deserve it. He shouldn't be here. Maybe if it was up to me, I would have sent him home, some people have said. Home, they mean like back to my origin country where I was born. Well, okay, there was a war and we came here and we stuck here, and maybe that wasn't a good decision looking back at it, and maybe my parents should have left us back home and left me with my grandma, and maybe I would have had a different lifestyle and life way, but this is what happened. I'm here and I came here, and I have to make my struggle from here. And so, because I knew that inside me I was not that man that people were talking about, I could actually withhold my self confidence and self respect, and I could understand that people were viewing me through some kind of disrupted idea that they had in their mind. It wasn't the truth. They had been like, people are not viewing me as I am, and not viewing my story as it happened. And it is very hard, especially in Denmark, because they are still, but at that time 20 years ago, they were still on the brink of going from being that very closed, homogenic tribe to becoming like more global, open-minded, understanding other religions and people. So they are a tough people to deal with, and some of them has this what you can call a Viking mentality of crushing everybody they don't like, and if you don't follow rule, you don't fit in. And I was definitely at that time not a person who followed rule, and I followed the rules of the law, but I mean in my culture and way of living. So I was a minority from the beginning, and I was a minority in the minority because the Muslim minority was also very diverse. Most of them secular, not wanting to have anything to do with these special religious practices, and those who had something to do with the religious and traditional practices or accepted it, they didn't want to have anything to do with the political ideological community that I was part of. So it's like a minority within a minority within a minority, and in that minority of being a political activist for some ideal thoughts I had at that time, based on religious philosophy for life and the world. Well, I was also a minority there because I didn't belong to the Palestinians, and I didn't belong to the Syrians, and I was a Lebanese, and we were a big minority in Denmark and still are. And I didn't have many Lebanese practicing religion. You know, most Lebanese are somewhere else, and even my parents didn't want me to go all that depth into that community. But I was there. That was my way, and so I was actually on a fourth or fifth level of being isolated and being a minority, and that really shows you how hard you can be. Sometimes I could feel like I was this caveman just walking out between people, out of necessity, but at the same time I kept my society going. I had my alternative society in the Muslim community. I was a well-known preacher and teacher there, and people, even though I wasn't part of their direct tribe, they respected me and knew that this was my community. And I had my parents close, and that was easier because I had a place to be. I had some good food, and I was in a way sheltered, even though I was a grown-up man. Um, uh, but still, I went to seminary. I went to the education of like I was finishing the university at that time, and I went to try to find jobs, and that was impossible. And I realized that quickly, and I could put things together. And this keeps hurting me even today, because I think for a human, every human, when we are born and when we come to this life, the worst thing we experience is injustice. Maybe being alive in this world is in itself a big injustice, but feeling the injustice coming, like if people are being misused by someone, like psychologically or sexually. That's a big injustice for this human life. And how does that feel? How can people go on live with it? It's a trauma that leaves scars in the heart and mind of any person. And so the injustice you feel hits you. And I tell you directly, it breaks you. And you have to find ways of not thinking of it and ignoring it and fighting it back. And my way at that time was simply to redirect all my attention to translations and writings and finishing my studies and trying to get out of the country to get work somewhere else. And even that failed. And I don't know why up to this day. I felt like also betrayed by the people I was part of. They at least didn't truly reach out to keep me safe and keep me away from all this. It was just I was left alone. Like I also was looked at as the person who did wrong, and well, things didn't go that way. If you go back and listen to the cartoon stories or read my book, published by a Danish publisher and with a Danish journalist. I had long talks about it in another videos, and the books are available, unfortunately, only in Danish, but summaries of it came to the English media. Well, you can see from the incidents of the cartoon story, nobody could put the blame on me personally, and you couldn't, because the incidents weren't like that. Still, I got the whole thing coming down up on my head and on my shoulders, because the others, they were more in the hide. And that brought me to that isolation I'm talking about today. I was in the beginning isolated in different ways, as I said, because of the minority culture I belong to, and in a society that really doesn't accept multiculturalism and doesn't really like foreigners. So this is a taboo, nobody wants to talk about. Everybody wants to show the face of Europe and Denmark as this place where people are welcome and they are open-minded. That's true, but that's only partially true, because what some of us others have felt and met wasn't exactly that. And then you can say, well, it's your own fault, you are not integrating or assimilating. But I can tell you also from the view of assimilated people, not only Muslims, but I've also met Christians from the Middle East later, and I met people who were totally secular, and some of them atheists or even homosexuals, and they also met with these troubles, because there is an ethnicity fight within the Danes. They want to be that Aryan white race they think they are, and they somehow they are conflicted about that. And I know a lot of work has been done the last 20 years to make this country open up and understand the globalism of the world and accept people with different ethnicities and colors, and that has helped a lot. Now, when people meet people with my name today, I think I can feel the openness more than before. Before, they could just by saying my name or other people's name, even before the cartoon crisis, they could say it in a way that you could feel the disgust, and you could feel they are not making an effort to know your name. It's like, why do you have this silly name, or what are you doing here? And they are dealing with you just out of necessity. I'm not saying all were like that, because I'm going to talk in a separate video about the nice people I met, especially from the Christian voluntarily communities, and they made a big difference and still do for Denmark. But everybody knows they are this other face of this country, and it's an ugly and very dirty face, and they think they are so much better. And that's exactly why they act like that, because they know inside them they are not much better, and their culture has not been the perfect culture in the world. And here they come, these people who can look back at 1,000 years of a Persian empire or Turkish empire of 500-600 years, or the Arabic golden age, or what you can call the African the African continent and its Middle Age background. So people are not just gonna lay flat down and say, well, you Danes are the gods of our time. Let's all worship you. But that's exactly what we are doing as minorities and as persons, because the ones who has the power and has things running well, well, they are to be valued, and that's very normal. And the same went in the last centuries, where it was the opposite, where the Europeans or Danes and Scandinavians, they came to the Middle East in some 100 years ago. They would also be amazed if they ever went there. So it's all about these closed entities, closed mind. And so I was in this very complicated isolation of people not understanding what I did, thinking I did something else, judging me by it, and having what you call the folks judgmental court, judging you even though no formal court has judged you, because you have done nothing outside of the law. But they know, they think they know you are evil, you are no good, you are a liar, you're a cheat, you're all these things they think, and they have the right to hate you, and that's all. It's taken over in the hearts and minds. And so that's why some people cried. I had an email from a lady, or a message on Facebook some years ago, after I published my book. What am I saying? Some years ago, many years ago now. How time runs by and goes by without noticing. We are noticing, but so quickly. It feels like just like yesterday. Feels just like yesterday. You were part of me, and this whole story was part of me, and it still is. That's why maybe I'm talking about it, because it's a way of also cleansing it out. And I've always been talking about it in close circles and to friends and in the books and in my writings. But now I'm also talking about it with my voice, leaving it out there. I don't know for whom or what, but it feels good. And so those years ago, a lady who read my story and suddenly saw the picture, she said, I cried because I could see your tragedy. And it is a tragedy, and I had to get through it amidst the isolation. And Greenland was actually the place that gave me that free space. And despite the persecution that followed me there, despite that persecution that followed me all the way to Greenland, that's evil. These right-wing people who kept writing to the school they should fire me and get me out of the job. They even asked the prime minister in one session in the parliament. They had a question to him: what is this guy doing in a public school in Greenland that's under the Danish rule? My God, they would have burned me on the stake if we were in the Middle Ages. I don't doubt that a minute. They would have put me in jail if there wasn't a society with the rule of the law and respect for human rights, and if there weren't some clever and understanding Danish people in the elite who understood that I wasn't the sole perpetrator in this. I wasn't the sole agitator. There are others, and there are other parts that has responsibility, not the least the newspaper, and not the least the working group as a whole, and the Muslim world that reacted, and the Danish silence that didn't want to talk to anyone, and the political mistakes that were made at that time. So I think they knew also by the intelligence, because I'm sure they've been following us step by step and listening to what we are saying and anticipating our moves. And we knew that, and we knew we were fighting powers that were stronger than ourselves. But we thought we were right, and I thought I was right in reacting to that spitting in the face and the picture of the symbol of the Islamic world as a whole. And we were at sometimes angry and upset and wanted the world to punish Denmark. So I'm not saying that we didn't have these thoughts as well, but they came also as a reaction of what happened from the other side. And the other side thought they were reacting to what they think we had in our baggage of values that were dangerous and bad, and they are partly right in that, and we are partly right in ours. But anyhow, however you put it, you can't come back and say, well, this is the sole figure, but it's the witch. And that's what some people told me later. It's not about right or wrong. It's about you were the witch, and you were the most known face, and so you got burned. And so when I came to Greenland, it was just by a miracle from God and heavens and the angels' help that made these people soften up and feel sympathy for me and open their doors and minds to let me stay there. Because if I went to my original home country, which I'd actually tried in the years after the Khartoum crisis, I couldn't stay in Denmark. I isolated myself from people and society, and I knew I was not the the liked figure. And I said, what the heck? This is what it takes. This is the price you pay for carrying your values and carrying your mind and story. And I had the alternative of being with my wife and kids, and I took that. But my old society, where I was born but not really raised, was strange to me. So also there, I was a kind of isolated person. And I tried, despite some of the connections I had, to get into society there, but it wasn't easy for me. I understood at that point how much European and Danish I was in the way of thinking and a way of doing things and reflecting on things. So I didn't like their ways either, and the Danes didn't like me because they thought me as a stranger and not part of the community and society. So I was lost between the two groups and two parties that I was part in. So I dig deeper into the books and the readings and the prayers and the preachers. Those I stopped in 2008, and I put myself out of all religious activity from that time on when I went to Greenland, because I wanted a change and I wanted to reflect on everything. And I've talked about that in several other places. But the isolation, so how do you deal with it? I know it was a long introduction, but I hope that just shows any possible listener that it was a very complicated situation I stood in. I had to deal with it socially, economically, and not the least psychologically, personally. Imagine going to work every day with this branded face and name, and even in Greenland. And I had a teacher whom opened up later, this guy called Lasingwak, and I used to call him Simon because I couldn't express his name, and we became good friends. That was the captain I talked about in the video about Greenland, and he took me out sailing to the inland ice, and he changed completely because he could see this guy isn't evil, isn't bad man. He's nice, he's funny, we can joke, we can talk, he's open-minded, and he's educated. And God, I wished a whole society could see that. My life would have changed. But why are people like this? That's what's puzzling me. Why are people doing all this? That's what's puzzling me too. And can I blame them because that's what they think, and that's the limit of what they know. And the same with the Muslim community when they turned against me, and I went out of it. They didn't understand why. What the heck? Haven't they been following anything? Don't they know what trouble you've been in? And couldn't they see how things went wrong and bad? Isn't there any place for self-reflection there either? To say, hey, what did we do? Did we ignite this? Did we have a reason to do this? Could we have avoided it? So many didn't understand my leaving either. So in Greenland, this guy, Lasingwak, I called Simon, when he opened up later, he told me, when I saw you here at the school, I knocked in the table and said to the others, if he tries to do anything, I will. And he didn't finish the words. He was so upset and so angry because he's also been following the news in Denmark. So this is basically the people I met, even the friendly ones, kept maybe their opinions to themselves or just kept an eye on me. It wasn't easy, but I had to take a deep breath every time and just go in as if I was a different person, and as if that people didn't judge me as they did, and just try to forget that they are judging me even though they're not showing it all the time. So I just went with a raised head and kept my eyes to the sky and my heart with God, and said, I will go through this. And I went through it, and things changed, and the Greenlandic people changed, and they started liking me, and became part of the local society. Not totally, because as I said, I didn't go to those bars and drink myself to death, but how do I then deal with the isolation? Because that was also a new isolation. It was like being on a freezing cab. You're just earning some money, you're sending to your family, mostly, and you are stuck there because you just can't take a ticket. It's so expensive. You will lose the whole salary forth and back, and I didn't have money at that time. And so I was stuck to this teaching job, and hoping that these people will stay open-minded to me. And I couldn't participate in much of they were doing, but I must admit I liked being with some of them, and I also liked, if I could, having some love, and a woman or a girl who could maybe give me that the consolation I didn't get. And my wife far away, just um, very practical, saying stay there because we need the money, and what can I do? And so life went on these years, but it wasn't easy at all. And I had times where I was crying. I had times where I had to make myself forget by digging into readings and the cartoons, and you know, doing all sort of things. But even that doesn't make it. You have, and we have to be honest about the psychological trouble we get in when we get in these situations. So how to deal with it, how I try to deal with it. As I said, my first source was to have something to look into, the heroes of my childhood, like the I will talk about this later. The Tintin, the Asterix, the Batman was especially very, very special good sources. Then I had the Poirot. I loved Poirot and Sherlock Holmes. And then I had some other readings and books, and tried to understand philosophy and philosophers, and saw how hard they have lived, some of them. That's why I loved Spinoza, because he died early, and he had a short living span, but had told his story in the Ethics. And I was fascinated how he was excommunicated and thrown out of his community, a Jewish one. But nobody wanted him because of his thoughts, and wandered almost alone. And there is this Søren Kierkegaard, who was very misunderstood and was laughed at as well, even though he also tried to break free of these cultural fogs and jungles. It's a jungle, I tell you, to try to break free of any convention in this world. It's like we are doomed to be in it, and if you break free, as Dostoevsky says, you will be punished, and you will be driven mad, like it happened to Nietzsche, because Nietzsche suddenly realized something about the cruelty of life, and the last thing he did was to hug that horse. And I never forget this picture in my head. He hugged the horse and said to him that, why is this man beating you? And then he collapsed. And so it may all be in vain, and the pain is the only one that actually stays, and when it leaves, it's just because we make it leave. So I used 2 or 3 seductive ways, sedatives, not seductive, but sedative ways to make the pain go, and to relieve myself from all this reality I'm speaking about now. Because if I kept thinking about it, I would definitely go mad, and I will be a Kvittok in no time. Kvittok is the Greenlandic word for those people who wander alone in the fields, outside in the mountains and the hills, and they come back with an evil spirit. And I had to use some sedatives. The first one, as I said, looking into the hero stories, and like being a child, just going there with these childish stories, forgetting my surroundings and everything. The second one was the source of was my dreams, like being with myself, with my dreams, and the imagination, every evening or night, or every time and from now and then, just to imagine things that could have been, and the difference that it could have made. And that gave me a lot of easiness. It's not easy to imagine and keep that imagination going, but when you start it before you sleep, and suddenly feel relaxed in it, and you go into that realm, I tell you, it can just relieve you. It can be a sedative for your brain that relieves you from any thoughts that's hurting you on the outside. And the the third source of consolation was my religion and my faith in God and in heavens, that there is a compensation for all this, and the life is just a walkthrough. It can be a walkthrough of suffering and a lot of trouble and a harsh destiny, and a lot of evil are surrounding you. Look, at that time I really thought people could be evil as they are, but with time I came to realize that people are not evil per se. They are evil because of what they take on them of culture and ideology and religion. They can act evil out of what they think is and reaction to evil. And that's why many of these women in the Middle Ages who were just using herbs or looked into esoteric knowledge or tried to ease the burden on people or had different thoughts, they were thought to be in league with the devil and worshippers of the demons. And they were burned because the people reacting to them were very pious and strong believers, even though they were stupid and traditional. But they thought they were acting against the evil, so it shouldn't hit them. And so I understood people. And I'm not saying I could forgive the things that happened and that people didn't have a heart. My God, couldn't anyone just feel how I was? And couldn't they change their mind after meeting you for some time, understanding that you're not that person? It's like it made their hearts even harder, because, not all, but I'm saying a lot of people, because they didn't want to break the picture they had and the evil they already did to you and the pain they've inflicted you. So they keep closing it out and keep pushing you out, and that made everything even harder. And in the middle of all that, I also found, as I said, a good consolation and some people who didn't care. And I met also people who were fond of my bravery and strength and how I could get through all that. And I actually went to football and I went to teach in school without mentioning my story to anyone. I just acted like a totally ordinary teacher in the everyday life, as if it was the most normal thing to do, to be a teacher and talk to these kids on the grounds they understand. And I've actually written not a book, but a draft of a book about pedagogy, and I'm going to talk about it one day. And I'm going to talk about teaching methods and thoughts when I find the time later. But that's what I did, and that kept me sane. I could see my teacher's identity as a way of compensating, and these kids liking me, and I think they saved me. The angels in those kids could maybe see the angels in my soul and in my mind, and that's what saved me, because I'm sure they made a difference. When they talked to their parents and to the school, said, we like this teacher, he's nice and he's fun, and he's not evil at all, and he doesn't preach or do anything of these things people are accusing him of. And I'm not sure they said it this way at all, but I think just their impression of me made the difference, that the grown-ups got this impression that he's okay, the kids like him, and that cannot be bad. I also met some Danish grown-ups up there who liked me and who said to me, don't you fall on your knees for these what did he say? It was this guy who said it in a very special way. He said about the Danes that he said they are some kind of self-heightening people, like they put themselves above others even though they are not, and they always have to show others that they are not good enough. You're never good enough to a Dane. I can tell you that. I've been living here for 25 years. Whatever you do, they find ways to show you that you're not doing it right. And if one of their own comes and do half the work you're doing and half the education you're doing, they are met with praises. So there is this kind of hidden understanding psychologically of praising themselves and themselves only, and that's been broken with time. Greenlanders, they recognize this in a lot of the Danes they have met, but nobody can speak about it or put words on it because they sit with the power. They are the ones giving the money. We are here as refugees. What do I have to say? Are you dissatisfied with who we are and how we are? You can leave. That's the argument. And if they don't say it directly, they will tell you something like, well, you seem like putting yourself in a role of the offer. Why are you putting yourself in a victim's place? And why are you so dark-minded and only looking like that? Isn't that a kind of generalization? And these words make people shut up, and so nobody can talk about it because it's nothing you can touch, it's nothing you can prove. You need a hidden camera all the time, and you need electrical impulses in their brains and minds in order to register all this, and you don't have it, and so you lose any battle you try, because they get the power and the money and they can use it the way they are doing, with that swinish way of treating others, and the self heightening ways. And this is also a part of what I thought that time, because I was afflicted also by my pains, and afflicted by the reaction of the pains. You know, we can react psychologically without knowing it. Because when you feel the source of your pain has been, well, this newspaper spat on me first, they have been negative to me and my culture from the beginning, they don't like me here, and still I'm here. And that's my mistake. Why should I stay there? Everything is pointing me to say, go home, go to a place where you are more liked. And I think that's also God's message in the Torah to the, what are they called, the Israelis, that they should treat strangers good, because they were once strangers themselves. They should remember how they were pushed out of every society, and they were slaves at one point, and they were used and they were isolated. The Jewish knows very well what I'm talking about, because they have been suffering this isolation for thousands of years sometimes, and a long periods, and they try to influence societies from within. And some of them has this heart of revenge, because they know how hard it is to be looked upon as people look upon them. And I'm not saying they are not having some of these traits, like people would say about me that I have a trait of hatred and maybe judgmental thoughts. That's also partly true. And so when I reacted to the Danes with this mentality that they were like that and like this, and I also thought that, well, they are haters. At that time, I had to deal with it, and the way I dealt with that was to say, well, I hate you back, and I don't like you either, and don't think too much about yourself, because there are people who can crush you and will crush you, and there will be a day where your society will falter, and it will go back to the corruption and to the times of what we call it, disruption and lack of freedom and strength. You will be run over by other powers, and that's a reality that will hit them as well one day, and they will be the weaker part. That's what I think, and that's what I feel, because the pain I got was too much. I had to take it on me, so I had to throw it out or put it on somebody else. It's a miracle I didn't hit anyone, or I didn't attack anyone, because sometimes you could feel you wanted to, and you wanted to react badly, and you wanted to let this psychopathic side of us that we all have. I know some people like to say psychopaths about some people, but everybody has this side. If we are pushed enough, and if we are put in dark corners enough, we either go psychopathic in a way where we react badly, or we go neurotic. And being neurotic means that you go into a depression and you go into self-destruction mode. Otherwise, you react outwards to change the equilibrium that's not working. And that's what you need to talk about and deal with when you are in a pressed situation. Watch very much out for your reactions and lash outs. And I had some of these. Maybe it was mostly my family who felt them, and the close ones from my friends' circles. I know many of them could understand and and put it in a container. They can contain what I felt, and they knew I was lashing out because I was angry and upset, and because I was in a situation where I felt the injustice very deep and very hard on me. But sometimes it was also too much for them, and maybe my wife didn't really comprehend, because she was in a total different environment. She couldn't really see the deep picture and the deep hurt and feeling, and maybe she could, but didn't like the way I reacted and lashed out. And so it became worse and worse with these years. The trauma wanted to reveal itself and wanted to get the healing. And at that time, I started writing already from 2006. I started writing my story of the cartoons, not in a hatred way, but in a poetic way. I remember how I started writing about the story as a destiny and as a way of being pushed through, um, to walk through the inferno, to get onto the other side of paradise. And that's the way of the God, that to put people in these situations, or life to put people in these situations, so God can take care of us on the other side and watch us through. And I knew all that, and I knew it theoretically and in my heart, but still psychologically it's not easy to deal with isolation and how to react. So watch out for the psychopathic side and watch out for the neurotic side. And I think I shifted between them in those years. I went from being close to some kind of pathology that I actually sometimes isolated my feelings totally from anyone or anything or society, because I had to protect myself at that point. And that brings you very, very close to becoming that what we hear about, that criminal who loses his mind, the clever guy who never gets fulfilled in his life and then lashes out with a virus, or kills people in a laboratory, or try to kill his bosses and all that, because he wanted to show them that he was good enough and they never accepted him, and he wanted to punish the rejection and injustice. And that's because the pain had been too much to carry, and he didn't know how to canalize it and how to let it out in steams, and let the volcano and let the stream like take it away. Maybe he didn't have a religious source, or maybe the religious source convinced this guy to act like that. But it's all pathology. It's all a kind of psychopathic trait and reaction. And on the other side, the neurotic, the neuroticism is also what I had to deal with at some times, because whenever I went to that other side, I took care of my thoughts and conscience, and that God doesn't like us killing or hurting anyone. He will punish who he thinks is worth punishing, and he will let life take care of these people, and after life as well, they will be in a kind of hell, and they will be in a very regrettable situation, while you will be walking on the easy path. And so that gave me consolation, because I believe deeply that there is a God and there is an afterlife, and there is someone watching and seeing, and these people will never get out of what they think they are doing. They will be facing it, and I will get all the compensation. So I left it. But how to deal with the pain? So sometimes I went and like I fell into the neuroticism, and became neurotic, like sometimes very depressed, just looking at life as a sad story, and the ice outside the window as the end of everything. And I wished to die, and I wished I could do it, or that it would happen, or that God would finally send the angel of death to take me out of my misery and my miserable situation. And that's what anyone would feel if you are in prison or being tortured. I wasn't tortured physically, but I was tortured psychologically, and very, very hard indeed. I know somebody knows that, and I know somebody did it on purpose, and somebody could have changed it but never did. And I can never really understand, and maybe not even forget, forgive, especially my community at that time, that nobody really understood my suffering, and nobody reached out to get me out of it, or to help me through it, or to protect me from it. I never forget this guy when we were in Bahrain conference 2005 in March, exactly like these days. I'm in March now speaking, maybe a week from now, and I was at that conference, and the media had this this false story about me, and threatening a member of, and I never threatened anyone, but they used a false interpretation of, they didn't know that, but they used a false interpretation of a hidden camera from a guy that came with that intention of making things like this. And tell me, how will these people be free of their conscience and of life, and of, if you if you believe in reincarnation, they will get their punishment, maybe as 1,000 rat, be walking around being killed or something like that, and they will feel it. Or maybe something else entirely. I don't know what kind of hell God has for us people, but sometimes we know we deserve it, and we know that's okay. And I'm not saying that my actions didn't deserve some kind of punishment, or maybe isolation and rejection, or my ideology as well. But it was too hard. It was not easy anyhow, and I felt that wasn't just, because I didn't have any intention of hurting people or hurting Denmark or hurting the world, but I had intention of making these people who spit on us feel it back. And that's something totally different when you are acting out of what you think is justice. And the same are the others. So we are actually just reacting to each other, as I said before, but that doesn't change the isolation, and doesn't change that you have to deal with your psychological trouble. And so neuroticism made me think I want to get out of the world, as many other people would think when they are in a very hard situation. Said, please let me die. And we know it from the Mother Mary, at least in the Quran. I think this is a very beautiful passage that even should have been in the evangelical text, but it's in the Quran instead. And it says that when she carried Jesus and they rejected her, and she felt so sorrow for her situation, that she has never been with a man, and she didn't do anything that falters her honor. And anyhow, she was thought of as that kind of girl or woman, and she didn't like it. At that time, it was a big thing. I know women of my time today, well, okay, it's my choice, my life, and whatever. But at that time, it was like murder. It was worse than being dead. And so she wished death. She said, by the palm tree, and underneath it, and beside its root. That's what the text says. She reached the root of the palm tree. I don't know which palm tree it is, but it could have been, maybe the place could be found down there in the area of Bethlehem and wherever she were walking about. And she said, oh, I wished I was dead before this, or was something that were totally forgotten or out of memory of anyone, a memory that wasn't even remembered. And that's very hard for the Mary of life, for that beautiful and beloved woman that everybody look up to today, and think she was an amazing, special creature. And she had this suffering that made her think she wanted to die. And that's what we today call neuroticism, that you feel life has brought you out of balance and equilibrium, and things are not well, and that's why you feel, let me get out of it, let me die. And so I think I stayed for many years being between these two poles, sometimes going almost all the way of wanting to punish someone, especially people who just right there met me with evil or aggression or suppression. And sometimes I had this feeling in my heart, I hope these people will get cancer, or they will be punished, or they will hit something on the road. And maybe they did, I never know. And maybe my feelings towards them are being heard, and God punished them in some way or another. Maybe they never knew why, and they never connected me with that. And that's psychopathology, because you are not having empathy to these people and not showing understanding, even though in my normal situation, as I've just been talking about, I had a big understanding that maybe I put myself into these situations. I chose to be part of a fight and I lost. And what do you then expect other than the guillotine? psychological guillotine and the isolation. That's what you should expect. But I didn't. Sometimes I went all the way. I wanted to push back. And sometimes I went to want to destruct myself. That's the self-destructive mode we get in. And that's what I found out later Freud has been talking about all the time in his books. I was a living example of that my self-preservation drift, or what you call it, the inner movement of life, that's on auto mode. It's working by itself. You can't control it. Life will push you to preserve itself, even though if it means lashing out and killing others or suppressing or doing something you never would do. And the other side is, if you can't do it and if you can't keep the balance, you will go into a self-destruct mode. And that's the death and life poles that we have in us, in our psyche. And so sometimes they were out of order, but this, not the strange, but the very fascinating thing, it randomly affected my teaching position or my work, because I could separate it in my mind. I had such a strong mind that I could say, well, this doesn't belong to the school. Here I take on the casket and the role of the very, very ordinary teacher who's just working for his students to finish the exams, and who is funny and enjoyable and being with his friends. And so I put on that role all day long, and I was okay with it, and I could forget everything. But then when school finished and the quietness came down on everyone and the school corridors, everything started slowly or suddenly. And sometimes I pushed it further by, as I said, reading or watching series, or doing something else, like going to sports or talking to someone. But sometimes it came up, and when I was alone, I had to deal with it, and it became stronger and stronger through the years, on and off. So I've had this to struggle with for many years. So, and where am I today? Well, my isolation hasn't finished at all, and I'm I don't know where I'm headed, but the same old country, the same Denmark, is keep rejecting me. So I keep traveling for work, and especially to the beloved Greenland, who's also became more and more intolerant, I feel, with the years, unfortunately, because they want their independence, and they see anyone coming from the outside as somebody wanting to take their life and jobs, and that we were just there to gain riches. And then maybe they don't understand my situation, and some of them, they have a wrong association of me, just as some of the Danes. And not all the people up there are intellectual and understanding people. There are also people who has this rejection and doesn't understand and don't want to understand. So I've been meeting this more and more, I think, but it's also related to their own situation. It's not only about me at all, with Denmark and the choices they have to make. And so I don't know where I'm going with this isolation talk and what's going to happen from now, but I feel time has eased it, and I've got some very, very good friends also among the Danes who actually never left me. That's very strange, that the same people who brought me all this, in my eyes, suffering and isolation, has also brought me some good people who never left my side. So these are to be loved and mentioned. I will talk separately about that in another video. And I don't know if this isolation gonna end. One of my big hopes is that it will end good, or that someone would finally understand what I've been through and let all this negativity go, and use all the powers and competences and the good things I have with me in my baggage, both educationally but also mentally and psychologically. The insights and understanding I have today, well, it's a lot different than many other people, and nobody is using it, and it's not being applied in anywhere where somebody could apply it, or maybe find a way to do it. And at the same time, I'm a very practical guy. I've been leading projects at some time, and working on results, and I got the results, and Well, I think I've mastered a lot of things, and got through with a lot of things despite all this I'm dealing with at the same time. That needs strength in measures maybe people not always understand, and that's why sometimes I feel fatigue, and I need to recreate myself, and I need to get my powers back. And the best sources to do that is letting go of all that, and having some really good times with yourself and with people you love, or a special woman, or in your life, or a travel with a friend, or a deep talk. These things can give you recreation in ways that gives you the power back, but the best source for that is always to have the belief and hope and knowledge of the light from above and within, and that it will guide you. Stars will guide you home, as they sang in that beautiful song. Um, when you feel lost and you feel afraid and out, and nobody understands you, and then the lights will guide you home. That's religious, that's spiritual, and that's true, and that's the same words we keep hearing from God, that never forget, I'm here, I will show you, and I will be with you, and I will give you light in your heart and make you go through it. And that's not easy. And yeah, but why? That's a question I can't answer, and still I've answered it. And then how? And that's a question that's very hard to find the answers to, and still I've found some answers.